Roald Dahl was a British novelist, short story writer, poet, screenwriter, and wartime fighter pilot. He is most known for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and James and the Giant Peach. He was born in Llandaff, Cardiff, Wales in 1916, and he jumped around from school to school until 1934 when he finished and got a job working for the Shell Petroleum Company. Man, that's just terrible. Worst company to work at. In 1939, Dahl joined the Royal Air Force as an aircraftsman. Later, he worked in Washington, D.C. for the British Embassy, and he met C.S. Forester, an author for the Saturday Evening Post. Forester asked Dahl to write some anecdotes about his experience in World War II that he could then shape into a story. After Forester read what Dahl had written, he decided to publish it as is. Dahl's first children's book was The Gremlins in 1943. After the war, Dahl married American actress Patricia Neal and went on to write some of the most famous children's short stories ever, as well as writing as many as 60 adult stories. I put a little biography about Dahl at the beginning. I think it's important for his legacy to explain the man before I get into the movies that were based off of his works. I'd say Roald Dahl was a once-in-a-generation genius. His stories were usually like horror stories for children, blending realism with insanity and horror with comedy. He set most of his stories from the perspective of a child who, throughout the story, goes through some insane and terrifying event. I think because of this structure, I have never seen a Roald Dahl movie that I have liked, because trying to transition something like that from page to screen is nearly impossible. It's the same reason why there have been no good Dr. Seuss movies, in my opinion. Roald Dahl tells stories that can only be told in a book, so I think the more the movie diverges from the book, the better it is. So with that, let's review 36 Hours and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So, this is what happens in the movie, right? We got Jeff Pike, the main character, attends General Eisenhower's final briefing on the Normandy landings, and he gets a small paper cut when he's at the briefing, right? He is then sent to meet an informant for the U.S., and then while he's being sent, he's abducted and transported to Germany. He wakes up in what looks like a U.S. Army hospital in a post-war occupied Germany. There he meets Anna, I'm not sure, a nurse who is supposed to take care of him. Pike believes the deception long enough to give out crucial information about the Normandy landings. Pike then notices the paper cut he got the day before he left to contact the informant. He discovers the lie and confronts Anna, who says she was recruited from a concentration camp. Pike tells Anna to tell the scientist in charge, Walter Gerber, that he had known the whole time that it was actually 1944 and that he had fed them false information about the Normandy landings. After 2 days of interrogation, they aren't able to convince Gerber, but they are able to convince SS Agent Shack, who never believed the deception would work. By midday, June 5th, Gerber has been discredited and Shack orders his arrest. Gerber knows Shack will kill him, Anna, and Pike to cover his own blunder when the Allies do finally land on Normandy, so he helps Anna and Pike escape. When the Allies land on Normandy the next day, Gerber tells Shack that Pike and Anna have escaped, and then Gerber commits suicide. Shack then pursues the escapees himself. Pike and Anna go to a local minister who helps downed RAF pilots escape to nearby Switzerland. The minister is not home, so his housekeeper introduces them to a corrupt border guard named Ernst. Pike and Anna bribe him with jewelry to help them escape. When Pike and Anna are crossing the border, Shag catches up with them and tries to kill them, but Ernst shoots him dead and makes it look like he was trying to escape himself. Pike and Anna make it safely over the border. The end. Okay, you remember when I said I have never seen a Roald Dahl movie that I have liked, because trying to transition something like that from page to screen is nearly impossible. Well, this is probably the exception. 36 Hours is a war thriller based on Beware of the Dog, which was released 1 year after World War II and written by somebody who fought in World War II. So it makes sense that Roald Dahl hadn't developed his writing style yet and instead decided to go the easy route and write about a topic that he had experience in and that had been proven to be successful. The main actor, James Garner, did a really good job in the role as Jeff Pike, and Rod Taylor did an equally good job playing Walter Gerber, but Eva Marie Saint, who's still alive by the way, as Anna, was terrible. She didn't have much emotion throughout the entire movie. Even when she cried at the end, it's like someone just put too much Visine in her eyes. I think the premise is really creative and is carried by mostly good actors. It's not my favorite movie. It's not even my favorite war movie. That would be All Quiet on the Western Front. But it's a pretty good movie. There's not much to say when the movie is just generally enjoyable and entertaining. They didn't really do anything revolutionary, and they didn't really do anything wrong either, so...
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
It's just kind of like a pretty good film. Charlie Bucket works as a paperboy to feed his mom, who also works, and his 4 bedridden grandparents. He lives next to a chocolate factory owned by Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka is famous for not letting anyone into the factory and not making any public appearances. So, it's big news when Wonka announces that he will be hiding 5 golden tickets in random bars of chocolate. These golden tickets will come with a tour of the factory and a lifetime supply of chocolate. The first golden ticket is found by Augustus Gloop, which, I mean, that name kind of gives away what he is like. He eats way more than is healthy. The second is by an extremely spoiled and bratty Veruca Salt. The third is by Violet Beauregard, who is fond of gum chewing. The fourth by Mike TV, who, as the name implies, watches a lot of TV. The fifth golden ticket is thought to have been found by a millionaire/casino owner living in Paraguay, but it turns out he forged it, and the real 5th ticket is found by Charlie Bucket, our aforementioned main character. But when Charlie is going home, a candy maker known as Slugworth introduces himself and says if Charlie gives him one of Wonka's inventions, known as an everlasting gobstopper, he will give him thousands of dollars. When Charlie gets home, one of his grandparents, Grandpa Joe, is so excited that he has a golden ticket that he is able to walk for the first time in 20 years. On the day of the tour, all the children and their chaperone, which for Charlie is Grandpa Joe, are greeted by Willy Wonka and head into the factory. They find themselves in a room where almost everything is
It's eatable, edible. I mean, you can eat almost everything.
Augustus tries to drink from a river of chocolate and falls in and gets sucked into a tube and sent to the fudge room. Mrs. Gloop is escorted out to help her son. Then they are taken to an invention room where all the children are given everlasting gobstoppers, and where, against the warnings of Mr. Wonka, Violet chews a piece of gum that is supposed to be a 3-course meal, but when it gets to dessert, it turns the chewer into a blueberry. Violet and Mr. Beauregard are escorted out so that Violet can have the juice squeezed out of her. The remaining kids are taken to a room where Mr. Wonka is experimenting with a drink that makes you float when you drink it. But Mr. Wonka says it's not finished. However, when no one is looking, Charlie and Grandpa Joe drink some and almost get sucked into a giant fan on the ceiling, but are able to escape by burping. They are then taken to another room that has geese that lay golden eggs, and Veruca says she wants one. Her dad tries to pay Mr. Wonka for one, but he refuses. Enraged, Veruca goes into a song and dance about how she wants, things, I don't know, she just wanted a lot of stuff, I guess. And while she is doing this, she accidentally falls into a chute where all the bad eggs go.
Where does it lead to?
To the furnace.
Only Charlie and Mike are left, and they go to the final room, where Wonka uses a machine to shrink a giant chocolate bar into a television, and Mike TV does the same to himself, to expected results. At the end of the tour, Mr. Wonka tells Charlie that because he drank the fizzy-lifting drink, he will not get the lifetime supply of chocolate he was promised, but when Charlie returns the everlasting gobstopper without giving it to Slugworth, Wonka reveals that he was just testing him, and that Slugworth was actually named Mr. Wilkinson, a man who works for Wonka. Charlie, Grandpa Joe, and Mr. Wonka get into a flying elevator, and Charlie is told that he will inherit the factory, and he and his family can live there. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is, at this point, a classic, and I think the reason why it got that way is because adults see it as the perfect comfort movie and children see it as a power fantasy. To be honest, I thought this movie would be bad because when I originally saw it a few years ago, I thought it was terrible. Maybe it's because I came in with such low expectations, but I liked it more than I thought I would. Something I didn't remember was that it at some points was just a straight-up comedy. Like, the entire point of characters like Charlie's teacher and Veruca Salt's dad is just to spout some really good British comedy.
You don't know because only I know. If you knew and I didn't know, then you'd be teaching me instead of me teaching you. And for a student to teach his teacher, it's presumptuous and rude.
The actors were mostly good, with the standouts being Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka and Jack Albertson as Grandpa Joe. Peter Ostrom gave a good performance as Charlie Bucket. However, the character is so boring. Although that's the writer's fault, not Ostrom's. In fact, all the child actors did a good job, which is pretty amazing because of how bad child actors usually are. This movie shows 4 kids get punished for bad habits they have. Augustus Gloop can't stop eating, Veruca Salt is a spoiled brat, Mike TV watches so much TV he doesn't ever go to the table to eat, and Violet Beauregard who chews gum. Those don't seem like equal crimes. I don't know what Roald Dahl had against people who chew gum because chewing gum is fine. The music varied in quality wildly, with the second best song being Golden Ticket, where Charlie and Grandpa Joe sing about how they have a golden ticket. Also, it's the first time Grandpa Joe walks in 20 years. On the other end of the spectrum is Cheer Up Charlie, which is the worst song in the movie. The Oompa Loompa songs are fine, but not that good. They're not that bad either, though. I don't like Veruca Salt's song much. I don't think The tune is very catchy, and I don't like Julie Dawn as a singer. So now that I've talked about everything else, I want to talk about my favorite scene, the Candyman. Let's get the obvious out of the way. The Candyman is the best song in the movie, and one of the best songs ever. The Candyman would even be covered by Sammy Davis Jr., which would go on to be the #1 record in America. The Sammy Davis Jr. one is tied with the original in my opinion. The other thing I want to mention is that this candy store in the scene reminds me of a candy store that I frequent called Kilwin's. I've had some good memories at Kilwin's, and this scene brings those memories back. I know this is a personal criticism, so take it with a grain of salt. Overall, this movie is a mixture of good and bad, but the good heavily outweighs the bad. I can definitely see why it's a classic, so I will recommend it. For thoughtful people, not sheeple. Not many youth of today have enough attention span to thoughtfully watch a black and white movie about an actual war that affects US/USA as I type this. It only foretells part of what our current 2018 world has become. Of course, many of the sheeple ops people have never heard of Echelon, MK Ultra, the starving experiment of Ivy League students from bygone years, the Fourth Reich, the human beings, who deny the Holocaust, and the easily looked up 4,000 plus mind-controlled devices held by the United States Patent Office. Excellent plot with fabulous under-acknowledged actors along with a great fun touch of beloved Hogan's hero characters. Sorry folks if your special effects needs include lots of chases, blood, guts, blow-ups, and director J.J. Abrams' camera shaking the camera for light effects. You will be disappointed. JJ, what happened after the first remake?